first licensing liaison meeting, and I'm really happy to be here. But before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of all the lands that we meet on today. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. This licensing liaison meeting is an important event for ASIC. It provides us with an opportunity to directly engage with you, our key stakeholders, and provide you insights into ASIC's regulatory approach to its licensing and professional registration responsibilities. So just a bit of housekeeping. We want the session to be interactive. So if you've got any questions, please raise your hand in person or virtually. We'll try to keep an eye out for that. Or alternatively, you can email questions to ASIC Licensing Liaison @asic.gov.au. And I think everyone's on mute at the moment. So if you could stay on mute during the presentations to minimise background noise. Also, please note the session. So I've got a few full agenda. I'll share insights into ASIC strategic priorities, our recent internal reorganisation, and the work that ASIC's Regulation and Supervision Group performs. You'll then hear from Joe Harper, the Senior Executive Leader for Digital, Data and Technology, and Lisa Summers, Manager Regulatory Systems Improvement, and then members of the licensing team, who I think you all know. So just moving on to our strategic priorities. ASIC's work for the current financial year and into the future is guided by a set of strategic priorities. The core strategic priorities are product design and distribution, sustainable finance, retirement outcomes, and technology risks. Each of these priorities has a regulatory focus that's designed to target a specific harm, support law reform, or improve our capabilities and effectiveness as a regulator. A product design and distribution. So ASIC's committed to reducing the harm to consumers of financial investment credit and credit-like products caused by poor product design, distribution and marketing, especially by driving compliance with the design and distribution obligations. And you may have seen we've put a number of stop orders out on products, and that's one of our new tools that come along with this new set of laws. On sustainable finance, we're supporting market integrity through proactive supervision and enforcement of current governance and disclosure standards to reduce harm from greenwashing while engaging closely on climate-related financial disclosure requirements. We're also supporting the government's sustainable finance strategy, including the introduction of a mandatory climate change-related disclosure regime for large businesses and financial institutions in Australia. With retirement outcomes, our aim is to protect consumers, especially as they plan and make decisions for retirement, and our focus is on superannuation products, managed investments and financial advice. With technology risk, we're focusing on the impacts of technology in financial markets and services, driving good cyber risk and operational resilience practices, and acting to address digitally enabled misconduct, including scams. Supporting these priorities are our core strategic projects. These projects are focused on sustainable finance practices, crypto assets, scams, cyber and operational resilience, breach reporting, and the design and distribution obligations. We also continue a range of regulatory and enforcement work which focuses on protecting the integrity of the financial system and protecting vulnerable consumers in the current economic environment. These include cross-sector work aimed at promoting the ethical use of consumer data and AI, improving the operation of the reportable situations regime, and acting against misconduct that exploits financial market volatility. And just moving on to our organisational change. So the ASIC's, we're calling it organisational redesign. It came into effect on the 13th of July, and it is the most significant change to the agency structure in more than a decade and is designed to better meet our future needs as Australia's integrated corporate, markets, financial services and consumer credit regulator. The new structure enables quicker decision-making, improves operational flexibility to respond to emerging risks and harms, strengthens collaboration and coordination, streamlines our enforcement and compliance and regulatory and supervision functions, and combines ASIC's intelligence and international functions to better harness data to drive an intelligence-led regulatory approach. It's a bit of a mouthful. Our redesign, as well as our investment in data and digital, which you'll hear a bit more about in a minute, supports our commitment to being a leading digitally enabled data-informed regulator. Now, the licensing, and led by Peng, is part of the new group called Regulatory and Supervision. It's got a broad and significant remit. We lead all of ASIC's engagement and supervision, lead the whole of ASIC engagement and supervision across ASIC's regulated population, excluding markets. We conduct proactive surveillance, including on cross-sector and ASIC-wide issues. We lead regulatory reform and implementation across all sectors, mostly excluding markets, but not always, and provide relief. We provide relief applications and advice functions across companies, financial services, and credit. So we have sector and cross-sector teams. The sector teams include superannuation and life insurance, credit, banking, and general insurance, financial advice and investment management, and companies and small business. The cross-sector teams are strategic surveillance, regulatory reform and implementation, and more importantly, licensing. All teams either lead or contribute to ASIC strategic priorities and projects. So that's it for me. I'm now going to hand over to Jo Harper to discuss ASIC's digital transformation initiatives. And thanks for attending today. And you'll have to excuse me because I've got another set of meetings to attend. So once again, thanks for coming along today. And now I'll hand over to Jo.
Thanks, Greg. So as Greg mentioned, I'm Jo Harper. I think the last time I met with you, and thanks for inviting me back to talk again, I think I had managed at that point to kind of finagle myself out of the CIO role and to concentrate just on getting our digital part of our vision set up, which we've started to do, which is great. Under the reorg, I think I turned my back for a moment and suddenly I'm back with, I've now got data, digital technology and cybersecurity. So while I'm not entirely completely just focused on our digital vision, I've got that broader remit. I think it's put us in a unique position of bringing all those things together now to look for the synergies that we can get across them. So thanks again for having me back. If we go to the next slide, Greg, the content for today, we're going to talk about our digital vision, then I'll be passing over to Lisa Summers, who looks after our human-centred design, and she'll talk a little bit about our approach, and then we'll hand over to Steph, who's going to talk about the particular, which I'm sure will interest you the most, the streamlining of the AFSL experience. If we go to the next slide, and we'll go to the one after that. Greg mentioned that we have a vision, and I think I talked to you last time I was here about our vision of being by 2030, ASIC will be a leading digitally enabled data-informed regulator. And I think I talked last time about why we use the term data-informed rather than data-driven, and that's around where data is one part of the way that we make the decisions with here at ASIC, but we take a lot of other information on board and as a part of our decision-making process. The 2030, again, I'll just reiterate, we see this as quite a long journey, and I think Greg's gone off now, so Ping, don't say anything till I say this, but it's quite a long process getting projects up and running and funding in government. I think it's good because we obviously care about taxpayers' dollars, but there's a lot of work that has to go behind to get ourselves funded and to be able to get something like this up and running. And we think 2030 is a realistic time for us to be able to have really changed the way that we work and deliver some really good stuff. If we go to the next slide, one of the things that we've done is we've set up 7 target state ambitions, and I've used my very impressive Photoshop skills to put an arrow against the one that I think is particularly relevant for today. I'm not going to talk through all of the 7 target state ambitions, but the one for today is about making sure that stakeholders are at the forefront of service delivery and design. And that's what we're really trying to do. And we're trying to use this AFSL experience reimagining to be the spearhead of changing the way that we engage with stakeholders and the way that we work with them. Our aim is that the people that are doing the wrong things know they're doing the wrong things. That's not because our systems don't let them do the right thing. It's because they actively have to do to know that they're doing the wrong thing. Our systems should be intuitive. They should be easy to use, and people should be able to just get to do what they need to do to deal with it in the simplest way possible. So if we go to the next slide, before I pass to Lisa, who's going to talk a little bit about how we are going to achieve that ambition of being, putting our stakeholders at the forefront. One of the things that the licensing team shared with me that they thought might be useful is a little bit about what's happening in broader government. And so a couple of things I wanted to touch on. First of all, some of you may be aware of the DTA, the Federal Government Digital Transformation Agency. They are working on a federal government data and digital strategy, and they released their draft strategy back in late May, early June, and they've been doing consultation. They expect their final release of it to be released by the end of 2023. You can see that they've got this mission, which is about speaking to innovation, about being the government of the future. They've also got a mission on simple and seamless services, and delivering for all people and business, mission 1 and mission 2. If you have time and you're interested, I suggest it's worthwhile having a look, and I can provide the link to the licensing team so that you can go in and have a look at the mission, and also how you can contribute if you want to give some advice to the federal government on how the federal government deals with organisations and businesses. If we move to the next slide, the other thing that we thought might be useful is just a little bit of, it would be so remiss to be a digital or data or technology person and not slip in AI at some point in the conversation. And so I thought I'd just give you a really quick wrap up of some of the things that are happening. Some of you may be aware that the government produced a rapid response information report on generative AI in March 2023. I think those of you that are familiar with Professor Genevieve Bell, she was one of the co-authors of that. And what they were asking, the questions they're kind of asking are, does Australia have sufficient compute power, appropriate skilled practitioners, scientific expertise, and workforce development strategies and policy settings across both the private and the public sector for us to be able to actually take advantage of all of the AI? So again, it's worth having a quick look at that report, because I think that's going to set a lot of the framework of how the government is intending to kind of push AI and generative AI in particular out across and also to regulate it. And I might just pop down to the fourth point when we talk about regulation. Look, we think regulation is probably some form of regulation of AI is going to be likely. DISRA, Department of Industry, Science and Resources, released a supporting responsible AI discussion paper. They opened it up for consultation, which closed, I believe, I think from memory, in September, but the submissions are available online. And based on that, they'll be looking at what kind of regulation potentially could be put across for generative AI. And again, if you're interested in that space and you're not aware of the DISRA report, it's worth the discussion paper. It's worth going and having a look at. So closer to home, I'll go to dot point 2. What are we doing? Well, we have adopted an AI policy and we're working on the assurance framework that sits around it. Effectively, what we've done is we've adopted the Australian AI ethics principles that were developed by DISRA, and again, we can share those with you. We're setting up a framework. We have a register of all AI that we use within ASIC. All of our AI and the principles tell us this has to be explainable and transparent. And so what that means is that we have to know what our AI is doing, and we have to be able to explain what it's doing in simple languages, and has to be transparent. That is, that people need to know that an AI is being used as part of the process of how we do our work. So whenever AI is involved, we need to work out a way that we're going to be able to communicate that. And as I mentioned, we have a register of all the AI we're doing. We're really dipping our toe into the water at the moment. We have been looking at AI for some time. Those of you might be familiar, I think as far back as 2017, we released a paper on decision-making and robo decision-making and robo-advice, I should say. So we've been looking at this for quite some time. The other thing to just draw your attention to, many of you will be familiar with the Robo-Debt Royal Commission and the recommendations. And one of the things, they identified a whole bunch of lessons, but one of the lessons that they identified, which was really great for us because it's what we've been pushing, is the need for human-centred design. And Lisa, again, as I mentioned, will talk a little bit about this, but they talked about the fact that systems need to be designed around the people that are using them. And they found that to be one of the failings around the Robo-Debt inquiry. And again, Google Robo-Debt and you'll be billions of references will come up, but you'll be able to have the summary of the paper if you're interested in it. If we go to the next slide, the last thing that I was just going to talk about was cybersecurity, because we thought just might be of interest. Again, some of you may or may not be aware of something called the Essential 8. This is what the federal government has said is the minimum strategies which they believe organisations and the federal government should have to be able to make sure that our systems are as safe as possible. Again, I won't go through all the details of the Essential 8, but it's worth, if you're interested, it's worth Googling, and it's a good thing to look at for your companies as well, to go, do we meet these in some way? And then lastly, IRAP. A few people have asked me what IRAP is, and so I thought it might be worth just quickly talking about it. So IRAP is the Information Security Registered Assessor Program, and that's what's used for any systems that the federal government uses that interface with the public. And so all of the systems that we build that interface with the public, all of the systems that we use that interface with the public, and the system that we're building around for the financial services licenses would also be IRAPed. And so that's a process, and it's really comprehensive, that goes through to ensure that we're in the best position to make sure that what we are building will keep data safe effectively. So I'm going to stop there. I'll be around for questions at the end. Like Greg, I apologise. I'll be around for the questions after Steph and Mylene have spoken, but then I will be ducking off because I need to get to another meeting. But always happy for people to reach out to me, and the licensing team can give you my contact details at Taos if you've got any ideas or questions. So I think, having said that, I'm going to pass over to Lisa, we nicely colour coordinate as ourselves with some nice green today.
Yes, wonderful. Hi everybody, my name's Lisa Summers. I am the head of ASIC's Human Centred Design team. It's great to be with you this morning. Joe's just talked about sort of the ASIC's sort of digital vision, and what I'd like to do is just talk to you a little bit about ASIC's Human Centred Design approach before handing over to Steph, which I think you'll be really interested in to hear about the work that we've been doing in the Australian financial service and licensing space. And if we just go to the next slide. As I sort of said, Steph's going to provide you with a bit of an update on the work that we've been doing in the design space. We've been working really closely with our peers and colleagues in the licensing team to really kind of understand and bounce off the work that they've already been doing, as well as our colleagues in the IT space here at ASIC. But really importantly, we've been really leaning in to really understand the concerns and the pain points from an external user perspective. Indeed, the vision for the Human Centred Design team is really to have users at the centre of problem solving. And I think when I think about human centred design and design, I always think about, when have I experienced great design? Indeed, when have you experienced great design? It might have been a website or a service or whatever it might have been. And we know from the things that we experience and what Joe's just kind of articulated just now, it's things like it's intuitive. It really kind of gets me, it understands me. I can get the job done quickly and effectively with high quality. And so it isn't just about what it looks like and feels like, it's about how it works. And the great thing about great design is it really changes our behaviour and how we feel. And if we go to the next slide, this is a bit of my mantra that I'm sort of holding on to at the moment. So we design the right thing so we can design the thing right. And as the Human Centred Design team, we're really taking a new approach to designing our services and our products and policies, both for our internal staff, our internal users, and really importantly for our external stakeholders, people like yourselves. I guess we wanted to sort of acknowledge that in the past we haven't always consistently engaged with organisations and individuals to build and enhance our digital channels and services. And we haven't necessarily used approaches such as prototyping, slowly implementing, and it's really exciting to be working in the Australian financial services and licensing space as we test and learn from implementing human-centred design. So myself, Steph and Mylene are the team here. We're really thrilled to be doing this work, but also be really great to have any feedback about what we're doing over the next sort of year or two as we embed this approach at ASIC. So feel free to get in contact at any time. I'm going to hand over to Steph now to talk you through what we've been doing in the AFSL space. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'll be taking you through the process and the outputs that the design team delivered to support ASIC to improve the experience of applying for an AFS license. The ASIC team, as Lisa said, the ASIC team is committed to ensuring that ASIC keeps users front and centre when creating our processes and digital platforms. We were pleased to engage in this significant project to better align the AFS application with users' requirements. So firstly, the purpose of the project. It was, how might we redesign the AFS license for users so we can improve their experience, including reducing time and effort. So of course, here when we're talking about users, we're talking about stakeholders who apply, vary and cancel an AFS license. This project achieved significant engagement with stakeholders who had recently finalised an AFS licence application. We conducted extensive research with over 40 hours of user research. We conducted 23 interviews with around 60 users. We had such a strong response from users invited to participate, and we had diverse representation, including Australian and international banks, insurance, financial planning, superannuation and funds management, just to name a few. We had really, really good engagement. So firstly, just a bit about the process. We conducted 3 rounds of user testing. Our first round of user testing was to understand users' behaviour, their needs, preferences and pain points. And then based on this feedback, we worked really closely with the ASIC licensing team to identify ideas on how we could better support AFS license applicants. And we narrowed these many ideas down to three solutions. And then we conducted 2 rounds of user testing to validate and refine the solutions. We also consulted with the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK as an opportunity to learn how they have improved the experience of applying for a financial service authorisation. Now I'll talk you through just 3 findings from our research about the current experience. Firstly, users told us they can spend many months determining the information that is needed for the AFS application and collecting the required information. We were told the current ASIC website is difficult to navigate. There is duplication, RGs are not searchable, and information just feels really hard to find. Users told us that can lead them to not feeling confident they were across all the information that's needed. Another pain point is that users receive limited updates on the progress and status of an AFS licence application. Applicants said the processing time can feel really long and they feel uncertain as to when it will come through. And actually, ultimately, this impacts their ability to plan for their business. Lastly, users told us that the ASIC application is missing basic US functionality. For example, uploading documents within the form, pre-filling, auto-filling information, and having just relevant guidance throughout the form, rather than having to go to an external regulatory guide. So as a result, we developed 3 future state concepts to improve the current experience. They are the AFS Licence Information Hub, the AFS Licence Dashboard, and the AFS Licence Application. So I'll just talk you through some of the key features of each of those. So firstly, the key features of the AFS Information Hub were simplifying the regulatory guides, supported by improved navigation, and more support in preparing for an application with things like relevant checklists. We showed these to users, and one of the quotes from a participant was, "The biggest challenge for us is understanding what we need to prepare and who we need to get it from. Instead of taking a week, this would take us a day." I feel like they might be being optimistic, but it just shows the improvement of having clearer navigation, the improvement in preparing the documents. So secondly, the second future state concept was the AFS Licence Dashboard. This solution includes a centralised view of AFS licence applications, including current and completed applications, progress status reports on applications being assessed, including timestamps when stages have passed, and a view of the AFS licence, including conditions, current authorisations, responsible managers, and the organisational competence matrix. Feedback from a participant was, the steps in the progress status are really good and would help us feel more confident to plan. The last future state concept was the AFS licence application. This solution includes improving basic UX functionality, including easier navigation, guidance within the form rather than being offline, pre-fill and autofill where possible. Secondly, minimising the need to upload documents offline, just having the documents within the application. Indications on sections and form completeness to make it easier to identify what needs to be completed. And feedback from a participant was, knowing that we have all the core proofs in there means we don't have to worry about ASIC coming back later and giving us 10 days to get additional information. So, in terms of where we're at now, the design team is continuing to support the work to improve the AFS licence application, and we are working closely with the team to map out the UX of the experience. And lastly, I'd really like to acknowledge the support from users in undertaking this design work. So thank you for your time, and let me know if you have any questions.
Hi everyone, I think you're all familiar with me, Peng Li. I lead the licensing function, and welcome to those of you returning from last time and some new faces as well. So now I'll talk about the new licensing portal in a bit more detail. So go to the next slide. So this work was announced last year, and obviously you can see from the presentation earlier from Stephanie and others that our work is continuing. And we're starting with the AFS licensing process first, then we'll move to credit auditors and liquidators, with the time frame being that we'll start our pilot for AFS in middle to late next year, and then the others will follow in 2025. So in terms of the way that we're tackling this process, it will be a three-pronged approach with a new front end, which is the bit that Stephanie was referring to detail. Then we're also changing our internal workflow, so we're moving to a CRM Microsoft system, and also we have in mind in giving rise to better using the technology and to facilitate better data analytics as we collect all the information and make our assessments. In terms of the overall objectives, so we want obviously an online engagement through a single portal, which is what everyone's been asking for. As Stephanie mentioned, pre-filled information, so you don't have to rekey lots of things again. Clear guidance as we go through the completion of the form, easier recording, retrieval and monitoring, enable efficient licensing. That's the key thing that we want to be able to achieve through this process, make decisions efficiently and accurately. And we also want to reduce the number of requisitions. So in the ideal world, there will be one application comes in, it gets a one-pass assessment and a decision's made, which is what we're striving for. Obviously, there'll be things that make that not workable, but hopefully we can minimize those as we go through. And of course, we want to collect the information in a structured way so that we can produce reports and analyse the data in a more effective manner. Now, turning to the key assessment considerations as part of this scoping of this exercise is we'll be undertaking a review of our key regulatory licensing guidance, which are up there, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with those. Looking at fit and proper checks, which Nick and Jared will talk about in more detail shortly. We're also going to re-examine the responsible manager regime and the key person condition, looking at the competency thresholds under RG 105, and we're going to try and work on ways to improve the A5 business activity description so that we can get a clearer perspective of the business model that applicants are applying for. That will also, I suspect, help with our assessment processes because a lot of questions come out of that. Outsourced arrangements, so that's a key area obviously of risk, cybersecurity and cyber arrangements, something that with the cloud that we're going to be focusing on. Cybersecurity in its own right, as Joe mentioned, those principles, we are going to be configuring a range of technological related questions that to build on the understanding of our participants about what their cybersecurity arrangements look like. We're going to have a revisit of the deeds of subordination, and we're also going to review our engagement model as a result of the HCD learnings under the new portal as well. So we've obviously done a bit of that, and Jared and Nick will talk a bit more about our engagement model while. So if there's any, Jared want to add to that? No? Okay, shaking your heads. Thank you. All right, so now I'll just move on to talking about the licensing performance over the last year and also some more current information to date. First one is just our snapshot of what volumes look like over the last financial year, and similar to historical records, it's about a 60-30 70-30-10 split between AFS, credit and auditor applications. So no real changes there. Slide. So this one is our usual 3-year applications received, and the black line is the current or the last financial year, and you'll see that the volumes are similar to the previous 2 years, but obviously slightly lower and trending down. On-hand volumes, you can see there again the black line is the last financial year, and again just to report that the number of applications on hand during the period is falling, and last little while it's been pretty steady July onwards. And then on our finalised matters, again, black line is the current one, and there the number of matters finalised has decreased, and that's probably a factor of the fact that our volumes have diminished over that period of time. We expect that that should either level off or at least, we'll start getting better as well as we go along, and I'll show you some KEI results after, which should support that. Okay, so this slide is looking at the AFS performance, and the number of days is on the y-axis. So any line that's trending down is a good result because the number of days is getting less, and obviously if it's trending up, it's not great. And you'll see from that and each of those bars from the bottom is the percentage of applications that we're completing. So the key one there is that the middle blue, dark blue line is trending down. So the number of matters that the 50% of matters is being reduced in terms of the days. And you'll see that obviously the number of aged matters, those more than 250 days, is trending up for the 90% mark. That's a consequence of the backlog. So that period when it started trending up was 21-22, so about July 21 onwards, and that's the result of the claims handling and debt management applications that we had to deal with, which meant that obviously other matters had to be delayed a bit more, resolving. That's the consequence of those numbers going up. And for ACL, so we've always had great results in the ACL space, and you can see all of those since July 21, they're all trending down. So we've always been pleased. We've got really good results on the credit side of things, and it's getting better as time progresses as well. So this one's the median age of matters. It's a bit of a busy slide, but you can see from that the general trend is trending down. So across the categories of new variations for credit and AFS, everything's the number of days that it's taking on a median basis over the last 2 years is reducing dramatically, getting around to between 50 and 100-ish days. So that's a great result. Okay, turning to the time it takes to complete 25% of applications, 50, 70 and 90. So the things highlighted in red are where we haven't met our KPIs, and the others are where we have. And you'll see that for AFS versus credit, so the first 2 rows versus the last 2, it takes us approximately twice as long or longer to complete AFS applications as it does to complete credit applications. And you'll see from that slide that it's, we're getting through about 25% within about under 50 days in the AFS space, and 50% is somewhere between 84 and 111. I guess the thing to call out there is really that the variation applications does take us longer than a new application, which may come as a surprise to some of you because a new application obviously has more involved with it, given we know nothing about the applicant or its people. But on the flip side, once you are a licensee, there is a lot more information that ASIC has about you, and so that is the reason why it's taking more time to complete those variation applications. Okay, the next one is a performance of our percentage of AFS and credit within the 150-day KPI since 2021. So the last 2 years getting to 150 days and 240 days. So the red you'll see there is where we didn't meet our KPIs for the last 2 financial years, getting to 150 days, but we did for the 240 days. But the columns in blue are the good news story that since the 1st of July this year, getting to 150 days and 240 days, significant improvements in our time completion of matters. So it's a great story that we've got to report today. Turning now to the outcomes of finalised applications the last financial year. So you'll see there that the number of approved applications in AFS is around about 80% versus credit with about 66%. And the withdrawal rates and the rejection from lodgement ones are up there as well. And I think obviously we don't like to see too many go to refusal, and hopefully we've given people enough of an indication that they don't end up in that last row and either decide to withdraw or lift the areas which we are concerned about so that they can end up in that 80% area. And I think probably the thing to call out here is that we'd like to see, particularly with the new portal, that we end up with the number of withdrawals and rejected for lodgement, which in AFS space is about 20% and 35% in the credit space. We're hoping, our ambition is that with the new portal will provide sufficient guidance and set the threshold such that those numbers significantly drop. Benefit of that obviously is that a lot of your time is not spent having to have back and forths with ASIC, and also we'll be able to devote more of our time to the areas of focus and therefore improve on our completion rates. Okay, this might be my last slide. This shows you that in terms of the applications that get through, 47% of those, or rather I can say 53% of AFS applications and 32% of credit applications go through without any changes to them. I thought that was an interesting number to call out, in which case the numbers up there in blue represent the ones where we've had a regulatory change to what an applicant had applied for in their application. The key one there is in relation to the key person condition. Obviously, it's the highest percentage, and for some reason those numbers haven't appeared there, but it's about 30% of applications that are granted have a key person condition imposed on them in the AFS space, and about 56% in the credit space. So that's probably one of the key highlights that came out of that slide. And then the other one, very small percentages of cases where additional responsible managers are required, both in credit and AFS in relative terms, and also additional conditions is also very low. Okay, well, I'll leave it at that and hand over to Nick and Jared to talk about some of the other licensing issues.
Thanks, Penny. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm just going to go over a few changes to licensing processes, either previously made or upcoming, as well as some reforms before passing to Jared to speak further about issues going on in the licensing space. So first, fit and proper people. We know this is a significant issue for most applicants and people here today. I see a lot of nods. That's great. We hear feedback, and as Peng flagged earlier, a fulsome review of our fit and proper person requirements is something that is underway, and we will, when we have a new portal, I'm sure fit and proper will look different. We are pleased, though, to say we're already making some changes to our approach that is intended to reduce the burden on applicants without compromising our assessment. two things that we can announce today. Firstly, bankruptcy checks, Australian bankruptcy checks. Currently, we require those bankruptcy checks for all responsible managers and fit and proper persons. We're going to lift that requirement. ASIC's confident in data arrangement that we have with to obtain that data directly from the National Personal Insolvency Index. So we will be removing that requirement. Obviously, foreign or overseas bankruptcy checks will still be required where they're relevant for those individuals. And for those individuals, secondly, we are considering accepting international criminal and bankruptcy checks from third-party providers. You'll probably all be aware of providers that offer that service, might have a wrapped-up criminal bankruptcy check for one or more jurisdictions. Previously, guidance has been clear that we require the checks directly from the national state, if relevant, provider. So we will be accepting, working out how we'll accept those third-party checks. We are engaging with some overseas regulators to work out just some of the issues at the margins, but we expect that we'll be able to include some guidance updated in our info sheet, as well as hopefully eventually our regulatory guidance. But as flagged there, our system that we have currently means that the application form might still say that these documents are required. We will fix that as well as we can, but it will be fully reflected in our info sheet, our guidance hopefully, and in the new portal world. Our debt management services was one of the reforms that we worked through from July 2021 onwards. We've licensed, as at today, 82 credit licenses with a debt management firm authorization, and we have a small number that are still currently under assessment. The data that Ping showed you earlier, those graphs, reflect in large part the very significant number of credit debt management firm applications we had. The thing of note there is that we had a withdrawal rate from those applicants that was about 3 times greater than your traditional credit provider or credit assistance provider applications, which was reflected again in the large withdrawal rate compared to AFSL. We'd expect that to go to a bit more standard number. We would also encourage anyone here to report any person they suspect might be providing debt management services without an authorization. So that can be lodged as a report of misconduct, or just reach out if there's any questions. We can put you onto the right people. Thank you, Cass. The financial accountability regime, you would have heard all about this. So a new regime that will commence on the 15th of March 2024 for our ADIs. And it poses a number of requirements to provide information relating to what is referred to as the accountable entity, as well as accountable persons. That information will be included on the FRA. So jointly regulated APRA ASIC regime, but arrangements will be put in place for APRA Connect to be the single portal for the provision of FAR data. It's been designed so that people who need to provide data will only need to provide it once through that portal, and then ASIC and APRA can both use it for its regulatory purposes. There are joint information webinars that are already available on APRA's website. I can provide those to anyone who's interested who might not have already seen them. Thank you, Cass. And the enhanced registry sandbox. So really just wanted to call out here that the sandbox continues in operation. We've received those applications or notifications, sorry, and just encourage people to consider whether they might have a client that could be considered for the ERS. We've got currently 5 participants that are participating in the ERS, 1 credit provider and 2 people in the payment space. We'd encourage anyone who was thinking about the ERS to reach out to the Innovation Hub they can discuss the sandbox requirements, what can and cannot be participating in the space, and also happy if anyone wants contact to reach out to myself or anyone in the licensing team. I think that's it for me, Cass. Yeah.
Thanks, Nick, and good morning, everyone. I too will be speaking to some topical matters relevant to licensing, our licensed population and licensing stakeholders. Looking to regulatory developments that are expected to impact the licensing landscape, in June of this year, the government released 2 consultation papers with the aim of ensuring regulation keeps pace with payments innovations. The second of these papers invited feedback on the proposed list of payments functions that would be regulated under the new licensing framework. This would include regulation of stored value facilities. Further consultation on the regulatory obligations under the new licensing framework is expected later this year to facilitate the introduction of legislation for the new payments licensing regime 2024. Treasury has also recently released its consultation paper on the future regulation of crypto asset service providers. The proposal is to apply the ASIC regime to certain service providers. Responses to the consultation can be submitted up until 1st of December this year. ASIC views this consultation as an opportunity to design a framework that's fit for purpose. ASIC needs access to the same or similar tools as we have for other products and related services. Continue to act to protect the consumer wherever possible within the powers that our regulatory framework permits. I'm going to now briefly speak to some other matters relevant to all licence holders. Firstly, cyber resilience, which has also been touched on in other aspects of the presentation today. Again, in June of this year, ASIC regulated entities were invited to take part in a survey to measure cyber resilience in Australia's corporate and financial markets. ASIC will publish a report with key findings from the survey later this year. The report will provide sectoral insights, areas for action, and details of better practices identified through the process. Participants were able to opt in to receiving a report comparing themselves to their peers, which 95% of participants have opted into. ASIC encourages entities to foster a culture of cyber awareness. In a recent speech, ASIC's chair again highlighted the need for organisations to take an active approach to evaluating and managing cyber risk. I'd also like to take the opportunity to make mention of developments regarding the reportable situations regime. In April, ASIC updated its regulatory guidance, RG78, which would be familiar to many of you, and this included additional guidance for industry in support of more effective reporting. ASIC has also been preparing its second annual report on information that is provided under the regime. Amongst other things, this report is intended to assist industry and consumers to identify where significant breaches are occurring. I'd encourage you to keep an eye out for the report through our media releases. The final subject I'd like to cover before we move to questions is that of licensing stakeholder engagement, of particular relevance to most attendees today. Together with ASIC's regulatory efficiency unit, across the past 12 to 18 months, we've tested and now implemented enhancements to the way we interact with applicants and service providers, in particular as part of the AFS licensing process. We've incorporated changes that provide additional engagement avenues for applicants while aiming to increase our levels of responsiveness and transparency on application progress. Amongst other enhancements, this has included offering applicants increased opportunities to meet to discuss novel or complex applications and to engage with us about more substantive information requests, particularly where an applicant may not have anticipated those questions. We'll continue to monitor the impact of those changes, including through surveying applicants at the end of the licensing process. We are in many cases receiving positive feedback through those surveys, while acknowledging there are still areas where we can improve. Survey responses continue to reinforce that applicants desire transparency and increased timeliness in the licensing assessment process. Responses also indicate that applicants would welcome a licensing portal, no surprise to anyone, that makes the experience more seamless and efficient. We continue to welcome your feedback both through the surveys but also indeed separately. That concludes the formal part of our presentation. We'll now open up to your questions.